everyone, Joe here from ActionX. Welcome to What's on the Two. It's our show where we normally review things in the world of television, episode of shows, season by season of shows, or doing these full season review lengths with spoilers. I was actually debating. First of all, we're reviewing Reacher this week, so don't worry. I was debating for a couple of days now on how to do the Reacher review, since normally this is kind of a unique thing where I know Reacher's going to come back for season 2. I am aware of there might not be a lot of things that we'll be able to do in the future. Plus, Amazon Prime's still a very inconsistent network in terms as a streamer. In terms of, do we get it weekly like The Boys is recently, or now where it's like here's all the episodes, here's season 1. That's what I'm confused by. And honestly, I went into finally decide, you know what, as much as I like Reacher, Reacher seems to be a very unique sort because it's based on a book series, also called, they don't have every book is different. It's just based on the author, similar to Game of Thrones, where not every installment is called Game of Thrones. Not every book is called Reacher. It's mostly the characters' journeys continue, but every book's kind of standalone, where as long as you know, like, the main character, the rest of the novels are like, you can jump in at any point. Any book is a good entry point to the story, and you are kind of still building up the backstory, but there really isn't a consistent, like, plot throughout the multiple books, kind of like a Harry Potter or not Lord of the Rings, something like that, in terms of like or Percy Jackson, something more of like, every book depends on the story of the previous one. That's not really the case from what I understand of the books. I never read the Reacher books. My only understanding of the character of Jack Reacher was the Tom Cruise movies that came out in 2012 and then 2016. I mostly know, I never seen the Reacher movies. I know one of my best friends praises them only because of the actor. But normally, no, I was aware of the character even when I was in high school. And from what I was reading up on in terms of when I was researching the show before I started watching, is that the Reacher you see in the show is probably the most accurate depiction of the character compared to Tom Cruise, who's kind of short. I think I'm taller than him, I believe. I'm not really sure. I have to double check my facts on that. But it's funny for me as a person who is just an average human being to be taller than an actor, which I'm like, it was meant to happen. I'm like, I don't know. Okay, enough about size. Enough. I make that joke often with my co-host George, but. So here we are, we're reviewing Reacher. I'd say, you know what, we're going to review everything from the first season because there's nothing really to spoil. Like, when we do come back for season 2 in the future, season 1, I mean, depending on how they go, the TV show could be different from what I'm understanding. Every season's kind of going to be its own thing. Similar to the books, where every book is not depending on the previous book. It depends on just, what the character is up to in his current adventures around the United States of America. And so for me getting into this, I've heard of Reacher recently. It's still a very brand new show. It came out, I believe, in March or February. I forgot exactly what month it was, but it's still a recent thing in 2022. And I heard about it because one of the actors, Alan Richardson, the star of the show, he was on Titans, which I reviewed already extensively. I also reviewed Smallville, but I didn't really get to touch upon his character. But he was in Smallville as well. So I've always been surrounded by him. He's always been in my the world that I've always, mostly in superheroics. So when I heard about this show, I'm like, that's cool that, he's getting his own starring platform. And one of the reasons why he left Titan season 3 so abruptly was because he was about to go into shoot. I don't think the timetables are right on that, but I'm pretty sure just logistically he knew, like, okay, I'm going into this show. It's going to be much more of like you're going to be enthralled in it, where he's only a supporting character in Titans. Here he's the main lead. So it's kind of a distance, like you can't really juggle both. It becomes very difficult. I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's a different feel when you're leading your own property compared to just being the supporting part. Like being a supporting part, like that show or that property will keep going on without you. Not to say that you're not important, but it's just because there's just so many moving pieces that you can always replace them as time goes on. So with here, like, you really can't, because he is the star. He's the titular character. And another reason why I eventually found myself wanting to watch the show is not just the reception, but also another actor I followed for a couple of years from iZombie, Malcolm Goodwin. He portrays a character here too. So I was like, it was nice to see him get to do something else. He was mostly a detective for 5 years on iZombie, and he's once again a detective of sorts. So I was like, yeah, if you play a part very well, that's kind of how you can keep going, and I really don't mind it. So going into Reacher, besides knowing nothing about the character or even the two movies, I just went into like as pitch me the show and pitch me how I will. I honestly, and again, first impression wise, in just one sentence, I really liked Reacher. I really did. I There was a couple of issues, mainly in terms of how do I say this, and yeah, this is a full spoiler, so don't worry about it. It just. It's honestly not. Well, my first issue is like it's not really a complaint to the show itself. It's mostly me where it's just so boggling for me. It's like I'm pretty sure I've witnessed or I've seen shows about drifters before. I'm pretty sure I have. None's really coming to mind. It's just so weird that this is a character, and how do I say it? That there's a character called Jack Reacher who literally just roams around like wherever he goes, and that's at the start of the season. I was a little bit trying to figure out the characteristics of the show and this character, and not to say they didn't do a good job from the get go. I was actually very happy they gave us the whole first season to binge instead of doing like week to week, because for me this wasn't a show like I would have been perfectly fine seeing the show week to week, but for me it was just about trying to figure out, okay, what is this character and how do we keep going? And it was always about like, I always thought there had to be some sort of like real thematic connection to the town, like, oh, this is his hometown or something, which I know that sounds cliche. I'm like, I don't know. I guess I grew up in a world of like cliche. So this is not a criticism of the show itself. It's just it took me a while to get out of it, and eventually once I figured out like all the finer detail, and at the end of the day, it is a mystery to an extent, because the whole premise of the show is that Jack Reacher just got out of I think he was out of the army, so he's just drifting. He doesn't really have a place to go to anymore, so he just is wandering the states of America trying to find purpose, or just trying to like figure out where he can go next. And he's drawn to the town of Margrave because his brother was there. That was his last sighting before he just mysteriously disappears. And then when he gets to town, he's just enthralled in this entire conspiracy and this entire, mystery of what's going on in this small town that ironically blames the hulking big dude. As soon as trouble starts, that big dude starts coming in, and I'm like, that's just ironic, and that's like one of the typical TV tropes, like, oh, when he rolled into town, then things get interesting. I always didn't like that as an aspect. I compare it to Pokemon, where I always wondered in the later seasons, in the later shows, when Ash meets his new friends, I'm just always curious, how long are Ash's friends just sitting around, like, doing absolutely really nothing before their series begin? Which I know, I understand, like, well, technically they weren't even created by then, but still in the matter of Ash has had years of adventures before he meets, like, let's say Alola, or the Alola gang, or Go, for example, in the more recent series. And it's like, well, what were they doing during all this? That's what I'm curious about. So that was in my mindset, so to speak. But getting into the show itself, I enjoyed it mostly at the premises that this was something new to me. And that's always what I always liked about watching shows, because I've watched hundreds of shows already. I've already reviewed dozens of them by this point. So by me, it's always the feeling of I'm trying to try not to be samey, be a little bit different. And that's one thing I liked about this, is that of course, obviously, I'm thinking of future seasons, because the uniqueness that the show will have when we do get to season 2 is, oh, we're not, Roscoe or Finley are not going to be in the next adventure. It's going to just be Reacher continuing his story and us filling in more of the backstory of this take of the character, which so far, from what I'm understanding, the first season adapts the first book. Now, not to say the second season is going to adapt the second book, but there is like the understanding of this is we're trying to figure out Reacher. This mainly the show's purpose, and this season, to an extent, is we're trying to find out who Reacher is, because there isn't like an exposition drop where his mom or dad are around and they just give us like the entire exposition. Even though there are scenes like where he's with Roscoe and Finley, where he's dropping in very minuscule facts about his life. Like, his life before, like, he was in the army. He moved around a lot as a kid. He had a brother who ironically was named Joe, which I'm like, hey, cool. Joe Reacher. I don't think that sounds like a cool name. Joe Reacher. Anyway, moving back onward. That was something that I liked because he gives us this mysterious aura that, like, he can never really settle in one place and really get together with someone for so long. Not to say I don't like him and Roscoe being together as a couple, but at the end of the day, like, it was just merely they teamed up, they had a brief fling, and then, now he's off again. Not to say maybe he won't come back to Roscoe. I don't think the books have ever talked about in terms of, like, him settling down with anyone. But given on the flashbacks we've seen alone, which I'm actually surprised we don't get too many flashbacks. I think I was mostly like, for example, I reviewed somewhat Chucky last year, and that was like kind of like the big avenue to tell Chucky's story in terms of like how his life was before he became a serial killer, and we got a lot of flashbacks. Not to say that was bad, but like that was a lot because that's how they would give us that information on finally getting into the finer details of his life before the first Child's Play. But going into this example is that, at least for me, we don't get too much into the weeds of it. Like, the focus is on Reacher solving this mystery that surrounds his brother and what's going on in Margrave. But it's never half Reacher's a Reacher backstory series / the Reacher show. It's never like that, which I do respect. And I actually like that we're not too into the weeds. It keeps the character going in terms of, like, we can discover new layers about him as the show goes on, which hopefully will be, who knows, the books have been going on for like decades. Maybe the show will go on for I highly doubt it because the timelines are different, maybe for 5 seasons or so. But for this instance, what I was describing is that's what I liked about the character. About it's just, you just don't know about it. It's also hilarious always to see, for me, like, this big intimidating dude, which he's not perfect. He's not Terminator. Like, he can still get his ass whooped at times. But he's still like the traditional, like, he's this bulk figure who was in the army. He can probably kick your ass. He does kick your ass. And he uses that stature to his advantage, that when he's around other characters that, like, Finley or Roscoe, who doesn't really have that same stature, they're as respectful as him, but they don't have that opportunity and that giveaway of, like, being able to, like, do whatever the hell they want. They really don't. And that's what makes them an interesting team, so to speak, where there's never a point where Reacher looked around. It's like, I could imagine myself in Margrave. No, there wasn't it. And that was another lure for me, is that it's a character that are never going to expect. You never keep going. I honestly thought going into the season finale, like, okay, he's going to admit, like, he has some feelings for Roscoe and he's going to stay in town and he's going to probably move in with her. And then, with the dog, the cute little dog who he saves. But no, he just keeps going. You just, like, nope, I did my part. I saw what I needed to do, and I need to keep going. And that was cool. That was really, really cool. That there was a sense of closure. That there was a sense of, like, this story's over. If the show was, like, didn't do well in the ratings in terms of, like, just the streaming numbers, and that was it. Honestly, I felt like story-wise, this was absolutely closed-ended. Like, we got what we need to do with the character, and that was it. And that's so rare to find nowadays, because a lot of shows tend to, like, even random shows that don't even have to use a season 2, well, or doesn't even have a guarantee they'll get a season, they'll still set up season 2. Regardless of that, it is so weird for me. It's like, but you're still doing season 1, and I know, like, most shows except, like, limited series or mini series, they always describe, like, season 1, like, there's a chance we can get season 2, so it's like, maybe we should keep things going. But it's like, no, you really don't. You really don't need to. Honestly, me leaving season 1, I can't even think about what they're going to do for season 2. I can't, and that's great, because it keeps me surprised. It keeps me engaged on what the next story is going to be. Whatever book they adapt next, I will be genuinely surprised. And that's also another case of, like, we didn't have to leave, like, oh, this character from the criminal organization is somehow left alive and he's going to be the big villain for season 2. It's like, they never did any of that. Like, no, like, I honestly thought the mystery was generally kept me guessing. I had some of my own opinions and some of my own theories, and lo and behold, I was right. But by the end of it, like, no, the entire threat's been vanquished, and that's it. That's all that they wrote. And I'm like, that is perfectly fine to be a show like that. Like, you don't need to set up the next thing. You don't really need to. I know it's easier down the road and hypes fans up for like what is to come, but at the end of the day, like, well, there is no guarantee you're going to get a season 2. There is no guarantee you're going to get some sort of continuation. How many times have we seen TV shows where you set up the next thing and you don't get it? Like Two Broke Girls season 7 never happened. I'm thinking about the show. Krypton season 3 never happened. Trying to think of shows that I got personally affected by that got canceled. Well, that's all in my recent history, but there's a lot more shows like that where you're left hanging and like, what is next? And then all of a sudden it's over. Like, you don't really get a chance to ever, maybe ever tell that story and finish it off. Maybe you get lucky somehow in a way, but normally you just don't. That's it. That's honestly what another positive I give Reacher is that they tell their story and they're done. They don't need to set it up, which I'm like, that is perfectly fine. And also the other characters that are, you know, not just Jack Reacher, which again, I think it was great, very stoic. Very weird for me to have like kind of like a silent character. Like, he's not too silent, but he's very like reserved and very limited on his words at times. Mostly in the first 2 episodes where like he was trying to like maintain that mysterious aura to him and trying to keep like a keep you guessing type of what he's gonna do. And honestly, I like that. Like, that kind of is something different for me. Again, this is my opinion, this is my review, so I'm just basing it off what I've seen before in past shows I've talked about or reviewed. That usually like the character would talk a lot, and he very much like speaks through his actions on what he does, and you know that this is not his first rodeo. That he knows people and what they're gonna do, and then he reacts as appropriately as he can, and he especially like is very blunt when he needs to be, and basically at the end of the day, he just does what he wants. He gets the job done, which honestly, we need more men like that. We need more people like that. You know, the world would be a better place if we could just do what we need to do, and then that's it. Which, honestly, is great. And speaking of which, like, honestly, like, in terms of, like, for me, as, like, you know, going into Roscoe and Finley's characters, I'm actually surprised at how much they gave them, and also how much close ending they got, where it's like, it's going back to the story again, where these characters will 99% not be in season 2. I would be fine with like a reference, or maybe even like a cameo in terms of like a phone call or anything to Roscoe in season 2 or beyond. I wouldn't mind that, but this is very serviceable to their stories, where you have an idea of where Roscoe is at in her life, same with Finley, in these crossroads, and figure out what is the true next step to do. And then by the end of the series, it's like, okay, we go from there, and that's it. There's no like cliffhangers, or like, it's kind of like everything like with storytelling. In some ending, it's just very open-ended for your imagination to explore, where you can predict on where those characters and that universe might go next. But at the end of the day, like, no, what we've seen or read is perfectly fine. We don't need to. We can speculate that probably they will go off to do better things. Maybe more bad things happen. We just don't know. That's all in speculation. And sometimes you could just leave it there to, like, you know, have it. Even like every show that has like a close finite ending. Like, for me, it's like, what happened to Frodo after he sailed to the Beyond World? It's like, what happened to him next? Like, I'm curious to see that. We'll never get that answer, because at the end of the day, that the story they were telling is complete. Like, we would love to see that character again, but at the end of the day, we just don't. And the fact that they made those two characters, like, well, I know the author made those two characters, but the actors portraying these characters brought them to life and managed to like complete their stories in a way of like, you wouldn't mind them coming back for a little visit, but their main stories are done and we don't need to see them more again. I'm like, that's great. That's awesome. It's so refreshing to have that. And go back to Reacher for a second, like, now that I'm thinking about, like, that's another draw for him as a character, is that, really, in reality, whatever, like, in terms of, like, character development, like, obviously the supporting cast definitely experienced, like, a complete story arc. For Reacher, it's kind of hard to say that because of his nature, that, you know, he acknowledges some things, he'll say some things, and in reality, that's kind of like a shade to like real life growing, where like the next time we see him again, the new characters that would hypothetically meet him would honestly, they would probably wouldn't even know about his development, because, you know, obviously if like for example, if Roscoe or Finley were to continue, like they would notice like you changed a bit. But in this case, we don't because we notice as fans and watchers that hey, this character has like been was a different beast in season 1 to season 2 to season 3 hypothetically, and honestly, that's good to see. That's good to hear that like he just keeps going with life. That life is never really fully defined by story arcs or character or scene character development or mention. It just happens, and maybe a reference or two is all we need to like keep the attention to like yeah, there has been some change. There's been some growth, and that would be it. In terms of the villainous conflict, it was unique to an extent. It was kind of generic. Like it was all about fake money in a small town. I'm like, I've seen that before. Not too many times, but I've seen it before. Guessing the villains, it was so kind of easy to identify who the mustache twirlers were, and like at the end of the day, who eventually they are. I like the way how they presented the mystery in terms of like how it eventually got resolved, in terms of like what the overall goal was and how we get to it and how it ties into Reacher's world. I liked all that tying around. Like that definitely makes sense. Like, and it never was like a leap of fate of like, oh, this thing leads to the next thing, and that sort of thing. It never did. It just worked. Like you didn't need like a jump in logic just to tell your story. You don't. Everything was explained very properly. It was explained very well, very easily. So people like me who have like a very tiny, not tiny brain, but more like it takes a while for me to understand. So it takes a while to get to that. But I still felt like it was a TV show, and this definitely was a case where it didn't need to be a blockbuster movie to tell the story. You didn't need explosion, and that was, I think, one of the choices they decided to adapt this first book is that in a small town there really is not that much action scenes to do. Like there are cool scenes where the gun scenes in the motel, or the final fight scene, or any one of Reacher's like badass moments. Like they do not need a big blockbuster budget. They don't. And the story still gets through. And I guess you could say that about almost every story. Like, there's a way to tell it without going so big and mighty. But it just works. It just works at the end of the day. Like, I really like that they chose this story. And this mostly was a character piece at the end of the day, because just seeing the flashbacks and seeing what these characters were doing at the end of the day was the thing that kept me going. Like I never really much cared for the action scenes, which I know like with a show that has action like that usually is like the big action shot, the big money shot. That never really appealed to me with the show. I'm not saying those are bad or anything. I'm not saying that at all. It's just it never was the thing that was keeping me going. It was how are we continuing to unravel this mystery? How is Reacher going to react to it since of his personal connection to it? And how do they fix this problem? And I got all those answers and more, and I was very generally happy with the end result. I really don't have any major complaints, to be honest with you. It's not a perfect show. Like I definitely cannot say I sat down and enjoyed 100% all this from beginning to end, and it's just the uniqueness of it. I think that maybe I'm just an uncultured swine. I don't read that many books to really understand the material, but in terms of like just an adaptation, I think they did a great job of making this presentable for newcomers like me to enjoy. That you don't need this big entangling like worldwide story to tell this show. You don't. Smaller stories are perfectly fine, and it perfectly works, and it leaves you loving the character to see where they go next. Not specifically in what they're gonna do, but where they're gonna go. Like what poor town or city is gonna deal with Reacher next. And honestly, I'm open to anything. I'm game. I'm aware there's like dozens of books, as I said before. I'm game for anything, as long as it's as enjoyable, entertaining. You get the right actors to play the characters you're adapting. You're bringing from the book series to the small screen. I'm open to anything as long as the quality remains there. I have no complaints, really. I really don't. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can forget. Oh yeah, I forgot I mentioned the dog before. Just the whole small dog subplot where Reacher he's just too like every time he gets so pissed off, it's like there's nothing he can do in the current moment to like really fix the main problem. But he always goes with this dog owner who's like really abusing his dog, which I'm like, first of all, that guy's a piece of shit, and Reacher decking him in the face was like the perfect response to anyone that I know that would ever do to someone like that. But it was cute. It was a very cute subplot, and it makes you. every big dude has like an emotional soft side, and you know they didn't make a joke about it. They're just like, you saved the dog, cool. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. And also, last but not least, I did not have an inkling for peach pie after the show was over. I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm not a pie guy, I'm more of a cake guy. I have a cake behind me. Well, it's covered by my curtains, but there's a cake behind there, and I'm eager to eat it. Well, not today or tomorrow. Can I ever eat it? I don't know. So they're gonna wrap it all up in terms of like just for Reacher of season 1 itself. I think this was great. I think Amazon Prime delivered another great series on their roster. It's another reliable character, another reliable universe we can come back to each and every year with new episodes. I'm loving the semi anthology format where you don't need to tell a sprawling tale for how many seasons to tell this character's story. The flashbacks are probably going to be the only consistent thing going forward, and to build out his repertoire. Because, like, literally by the time that the flashbacks are over for this season, is that there's still a lot we don't know. Like, yeah, Jack and Joe moved around a lot. They had to move away to another country because of just stationing. There's a lot of Jack's military career that remains unseen. Jack returning for his mom and dad not being there anymore, and the relationship between his brother. There's so much there to leave for more, but it's not something like there's like a big conspiracy, a big enemy behind the scenes. There is. It's just that's Reacher's story so far, and we'll probably get more pieces as we go along. And honestly, that's enough to keep me going. I'm just fascinated with the character, and I really want to see where he goes next in terms of what we see of his past next, and where he goes next as like his aimless drift around the world continues. Like, you just don't know where he's going to end up next. And I'm just curious. I'm game to see where that takes him next, and where do we see those adventures come out of it, and to figure out more of his world. And that's what's keeping me going as we come back eventually in the future for season 2. But for now, season 1, I thought it was really, really great. No major complaints. It was basically like a one. It could have just been a one and done, and they told exactly the story they needed to do. Cliche, villainous plot points, cliche, villainous scheme, but honestly, beyond all that, you know, this show was great. It really was. I've recommended this show to a couple of my friends already, and I can't wait to see what they think of it. But overall, for me, I highly recommend Reacher. Go check it out. The entire first season is available on Amazon Prime. So go check it out there. And we will be back later on for season 2 in the future. But until then, yeah, let me know in the comments below. What did you think of Reacher? Let's have a conversation down below. Are you going to watch Reacher? Let me know how you react to it. And let's just talk to it still, because I want to talk to people about Reacher. Because no one I know likes it. I was gonna cry there. I was just tired. But I believe that's gonna do it for me today, everyone. So if you're unaware, this has been What's the Two from ActionX, reviewing the first season of Reacher. If you like hearing me talk about TV shows and you want to see more of that, please go subscribe to youtube.com/ActionX videos to see all of our brand new episodes of What's the Two, which currently, each and every week, we're doing reviews for Walker and The Rookie. So check them out if you got a moment. We do other quick impressions, other first impressions, so go check them out as well. We have another channel on another side of YouTube called The Collection Compass, so go check that out as well. But however, please also like, favorite, share this review if you want to. Please also ring that bell if you want to stay up to date with any sort of updates we may have for the channel, for new video. Follow us on social media. But until we see each other again in the distant future, stay safe out there. Be good to each other, and as always, peace out.